Hey everyone, Stephen Bailey and Nate Mink here with the Post Standard and syracuse.com. Only a few days away from the Orange starting its season at North Carolina. Wanted to give you a little bit of a rundown of what you can kind of expect as best we can. Practice has been closed throughout camp. We haven't seen him since day 3 of the spring, and a lot's happened since then. Let's just jump right in with the offense. Sterling Gilbert, first-year offensive coordinator. We got Tommy DeVito back after being the most sacked quarterback in the country last year, right up there, top in the Power 5. What are you kind of expecting, Nate? And do you think they can get past some of the personnel limitations up front that hampered them last year?
Well, that's going to be certainly a challenge at the beginning of the season because, they are going to be down some guys, particularly up front. They're obviously one of the biggest eyebrow raisers of the entire preseason was back, H-back, tight end, defensive tackle, whatever you want to label him as. Chris Elmore, senior veteran player, is plugged in right now atop the depth chart at left guard, and that's not what anyone expected. Even going back to August 1st, I don't think they even realized that he was going to be one of their top linemen at the end of camp. And that's, that speaks to a lot of things. It speaks to, how fragile this whole thing is with depth. Injuries have obviously hit the unit hard. They haven't gotten any breaks or favors from the NCAA with Chris Bleich's waiver situation still being up in the air. So it's, as much as we talked about the offensive line last year being a hindrance to unlocking the potential of DeVito's arm and outside on the perimeter and the running backs that they have coming back. I hate to say it, but it's almost like here we go again talking about, can the offensive line be better than they were a year ago?
So without Dakota and Chris Bleich, that leaves Syracuse thin there. Like you said, Chris Elmore is going to be a guy at guard, Darius Tisdale, and then Patrick Davis. And I think those three are going to have to carry the weight until Dakota potentially gets back. And if they can do that, I think Syracuse, the offense has a chance to take a step forward, but the margin for error is thin, just like it was last year. And if they can't alleviate those concerns at guard, it's just hard to see Tommy DeVito and Taj Harris and the skill position players they have, getting a chance to produce at the level they want to.
Well, Steve, I think what maybe is overlooked too is, like you mentioned, Dakota's injury. Bleich hasn't been able to do much yet. Anthony Redd's another young guy that's not on the depth chart that, we know the staff has been high on for a couple years now. I think, not having those guys even available to practice or develop behind the scenes can set them back a little bit. And I think that's a little concerning because I personally think they could be a year away. If you have, a guy like Dakota Davis get a full season's worth of games under his belt, if you have a guy like Chris Bleich get a full season's worth of games under his belt, if you have a guy like Carlos Valderella, who's obviously going to be in the starting lineup, get another full year of starting experience under his belt, Matthew Bergeron getting another full season of experience under his belt, that's a pretty doggone good nucleus to bring back with your senior quarterback and, some guys at the skill position that they're excited about. The tight end room, I think, is going to be a strong point for this offense, moving forward. I like what this team has on paper. It's just all the pieces aren't available right now. And whether that's going to be a long-term setback, remains to be seen. But, I think if you're a Syracuse fan, I always kind of looked at this year as much like the 2017 year, where I know they're going through some transition things defensively and even offensively for that matter, but I still feel like they're going to be better than certainly what they showed a year ago. Whether that's going to translate to more success in the wins column, obviously that the other side of the coin is the opponent, and the opponent has a lot to say about that as well. And, I think we're in agreement, and a lot of the country's in agreement that, this schedule is a challenge. Anytime you're playing 10 conference games is a challenge, But But that 2017 season was brutal also. That was the year they went to LSU. They went to Miami. They went to Louisville, I believe. It was tough, but they grew up. And then obviously the next year they got what is that expression? Baptized by fire, so to speak. And they obviously had a unbelievable season in 2018. I kind of believe this program was trying to follow that trajectory again, in large part because of their offensive line. Again, maybe being a year away from being that strength that they were a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And before we turn the page to the defense, a couple more quick hitters from me. You mentioned Matthew Bergeron, right tackle, the sophomore now. I've heard a lot of good things about him. I think the staff knew that Aaron Service was going to be a really reliable left tackle. Bergeron as well has shown a lot consistency-wise, and I think of those younger linemen, he's probably the one that the team has the most confidence in. Another guy to watch, Jawar Jordan. He's the first-team running back, so it's not like anyone's sleeping on him at this point now that Abdullah Adams and Jarvion Howard have opted out. But I think his speed is something that first-year coordinator Sterling Gilbert can use to maybe mitigate some of the pressure that Tommy DeVito is going to be feeling. And then you mentioned the tight ends. I absolutely think they should utilize the tight ends more. A lot of 12 personnel. Aaron Hackett believes he's in the best shape he's ever been in, and Luke Benson put his speed on display last year. So those are a few things I'm going to be watching out for early. Let's get to the defense. Tony White came in after a bit of an interesting hiring process. Syracuse had agreed to terms with Zach Arnett. He goes to Ole Miss, and of course, in comes Tony. What are you kind of looking for early on this season, and what do you think the personnel has to do to survive some of those mistakes that are inevitably going to be made?
Yeah, they hired Zach Arnett. I remember this. I was in Philadelphia that day in January, and I think by the time I got home from Philadelphia, Zach Arnett was not the defensive coordinator anymore. No, I think it was maybe a week later or so. Again, I think they have pieces defensively, but it's the learning curve and it's the development. Obviously, the linebacker position is the area that I would lock in on a little bit there, but also the defensive line depth. Again, I like who they can float out there. I think they can go 5-6 strong and feel good about it. But you start getting dinged at one of those positions, like again last year when you lost McKinley Williams for the first really 3-4 months of the season. Someone has to take those snaps, and there's a reason the starter is the starter and the backup is the backup, and it's not easy to just plug and play, particularly at that position. And I think, quite frankly, the reason they went to the 3-3-5 is because to get that sort of year in and year out production from a 4-man front was going to be really difficult as a Northeast private school playing in the ACC, when a lot of that talent, quite frankly, just resides, we say, not in the Northeast and not in upstate New York. So clearly it's a defense that fits what on paper it looks to be a very, very athletic, flexible secondary, pieces that I think just from an athletic standpoint and a ball skill standpoint just haven't come through here in a long, long time. I'm thinking at least a decade since we saw the kind of caliber athletes that they have floating around back there, and Trill Williams and Ife Melifonwu and Andre Sisco, obviously. And it's, again, as we talked about with the offense, I thought maybe they're a year away. All those guys are juniors. If they wanted to, they could come back for a fourth year next year. And I don't necessarily predict that's going to happen, but that just, again, speaks to really, if you're a Syracuse fan, what next year could be really
Sure.
in 2021. But it's good to have guys that are 3 and out. That helps you too from a recruiting standpoint. Obviously, if a guy's 3 and out, he's a heck of a player, and they have a few guys back there that can do things that not many guys in the ACC can do. Particularly though, linebacker again sticks out at me. I think again they have the pieces, but I think they're a year or two away at that position. I think whether it's guys like Stephen Thompson, who was a surprise showing up on the first team at the SAM, Steve Linton, who I think is still going to see a lot of playing time this fall.
Absolutely.
Michael Jones is only a sophomore. Jeff Canton's only a second-year player. I mean, these guys have room to get better, and the fact that they're on the field this early in their careers, I think certainly speaks to what they can do right now, but also projects out long-term to be very, very positive for this defense.
Yeah, I agree with you. Quick fix. Arnett went to Mississippi State, not Ole Miss. But, when I look at that defense, you see all the playmakers on the back end, and you think, well, if you can put offenses in third and long situations pretty frequently, or you can pin them back near their goal line, there's some opportunities there that when an offense has to press, Andre Sisco and Trill Williams especially have proven that they can make some game-changing plays. The question is, how often can you put those teams in those situations? I think the defensive line is going to be tremendously important to the ultimate success of the 3-3-5. It starts with McKinley Williams at nose tackle. I do think Tony White inherited a pretty good starting set of linemen in McKinley, Kingsley Jonathan, and Josh Black. Josh himself said he believes he's a perfect fit to be an end and an odd front. I agree. I think there is some thinness in the margin for error there. I don't think there's a true backup nose tackle. McKinley Williams, like an Aaron Service or a Tommy DeVito, to me is a fairly irreplaceable player. Would you kind of agree with that? And then I know Dino has kind of hinted at the fact that he actually likes some of the depth at his defensive line. You mentioned young guys, someone like Drew Tuizama or Caleb Okechukwu is a third-year player. What's your kind of expectation from that group? And do you kind of agree with that assessment that this defense, to an extent, will have to go as the guys up front do?
I definitely agree with the latter point. I don't know what they have behind the first wave. I mean, the first wave, like you said, they played a lot of football. Kingsley was the primary, really the number 3 defensive end for the last couple of years. Yep. He's been on the field a ton. Black's been on the field a ton. Williams has been on the field a ton. Okechukwu hasn't been on the field at all. Tuizama has hardly seen the field. Got on the field a little bit last year. Curtis Harper had to play a lot last year because of McKinley's injury. So that bodes well. You hope he can take the next step in his development. Zach Morton hasn't been on the field a lot. I look at the 2021 recruiting class. There's a lot of linemen on both sides of the ball in that class. So I think that is certainly an area that the program is addressing and understands, hey, we need to get some reinforcements in here, because much like last year when they lost Alton and Kendall, they're going to lose at least 3 going into next year. And, who knows what other kind of attrition may hit any unit on the defense. But I think they have a plan. They certainly have a vision. And, this is really, in some respects, a reset of sort. I mean, this has got to work. I don't know if this doesn't work, where do you turn to right now on the defensive side of the ball? And quite frankly, I think this is sort of becoming in vogue across the country too, as a way to sort of combat spread offenses. So, I don't know necessarily that the scheme is going to be wrong. I think it's ultimately going to come down to, can you recruit the right players to make your scheme look good?
Yeah, I agree. Cody Roscoe, another name to throw in there. The McNeese State transfer is someone listed as a backup defensive end. We haven't seen him at all, so it'll be interesting to see how big of a piece of the puzzle he is. But before we get out of there, this year is going to be unlike any other. Everyone keeps saying it. I'm as sick of hearing the word unprecedented as everyone else is. But we truly don't know what's going to happen, right? I mean, positions are going to be tested depth-wise. It seems likely that at some point a player will test positive and you'll have contact tracing limitations. Like, you go up and down the Syracuse roster and there's not really a position you can point to and say, hey, if we lose a couple guys, like, it's going to be fine. It seems like the margin for error for Syracuse is so much thinner. And, credit to the university for all the protocols they've put in place to limit positive tests and mitigate the spread of COVID-19. Obviously, you look at North Carolina and all the issues they've had. It's a pretty straight comparison as to who's done a better job. But, like, how perfect does this need to go for Syracuse? You know what I mean? It just seems like it's so hard to create a roadmap with COVID aside for them to have a really successful year this year. And then you bring that in, and it's like any given week, you could lose someone that frankly is pivotal to your game plan.
I mean, I think it all hinges on what your expectations are. You know, if you expect this team to win the ACC, they got to be perfect. Yeah, there's no margin for error if that's the standard you're holding these guys to. If it's showing progress and getting better and getting a few more wins than a year ago, like, yeah, you're not going to have a lot of room and margin for error there. But you know, I would surmise that's 80% of the ACC, quite frankly. I mean, you look at a team like Duke or Pittsburgh or Boston College or NC State. I mean,
Sure.
I'll hone in on NC State and Duke in particular. They had a ton of injuries a year ago, and they weren't anything close to the team they were at the beginning of the year that they were at the end of the year. I think a large majority of the ACC probably falls into that category, as opposed to the Clemsons and maybe the Florida States or the Miamis and the Louisvilles of the world. So, you know, yeah, I think it's whatever your expectations are. I think you know, this year is going to be, like you said, unlike any other we've seen for a variety of reasons. I mean, the way and a lot of it is just the whole sport. You know, you have two major leagues not playing, right? The Big Ten and the Pac-12 are out. So you start looking at what everyone has their eye towards at the start of every season, and it's, will this team go to a bowl game? What if I told you they'd go to a bowl game at 4-7 because there's X amount of bowl slots and X amount of teams, and bowl games are looked at television inventory as extra games, and they have to fill slots out. I mean, that's on the record. That's on the record. Like,
could go winless and go to a bowl.
Yeah, bowl eligibility this year does not exist in the definition that we've all been accustomed to for the last 20, 30 years. So whatever you think about college football this year almost needs to go out the window because it's so unprecedented. I think from a program, from a team, from a school standpoint, let's play as many games as we can. You know, that's what the schools want. That's what the television networks want. If we can get 10, 11, 12 games, if we can get to a Final Four in late December and early January, mission accomplished. 2026 success. You know, if you're a player, if you're a coach, yeah, you got individual goals that you want to achieve this fall as a team. You got individual and team goals that you want to achieve this fall in terms of a win-loss record. To me, that doesn't change. I don't think internally the expectations are any different. It's not like they're all of a sudden looking around and saying, well, we didn't practice all spring and our summer conditioning program got a little goofed up and we had these starts and stops in the preseason. And you know, that's, if we only go 4-7 or 3-8, well, that explains, like, that's not how these guys are going to look at it. They're going out there, not just Saturday, but every game this season, expecting to win, you know, and I think, you know, however you come down as a fan on whether or not this is a year where the wins and losses should be evaluated in the same kind of manner that you would in any other normal year, you know, that's your prerogative. You know, I don't know if necessarily some of the decision makers and administrators at some of these schools are going to come down on the same line of thinking as that. But make no mistake. I mean, this is going to be strange, like you said. This is going to be kind of a weekly who's in, who's out. You know, we're seeing that already in the Big 12. Games are being postponed. Louisiana Tech has 30 some odd players that got hit by this virus, so their season's up in the air. I mean, it's a lot like Major League Baseball or any other sport that's not being played in a protective bubble. You know, teams are gonna drop out. but every week there's probably going to be football played somewhere in some stadium. And for a lot of folks, after the last 6-7 months, that's going to be reason enough to tune in and just be grateful for what you're watching. But make no mistake about it, when the game kicks off on Saturday and someone makes a really, really good play, they're going to be singing the praises. If someone makes a mistake, they're going to think, it's going to be like any other. I mean, that's fanaticism. That's what fanhood's about, right? So, I think it all depends on kind of your perspective.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting, that's for sure. Thanks everybody for watching. Be sure to go to syracuse.com, read all of our coverage, consider subscribing to our Orange Insider. Keep up with Nate, who's going to Chapel Hill this weekend to cover the game. And then me and Julian Wiggum will have our pregame podcast up probably sometime on Friday. So football is here, for better or worse, and we appreciate you following. Stay safe.